what are some of those problems? And I would argue with some of the evidence we have is it's like the birth control that flows and it gets recycled through that water that we end up drinking. Mm-hmm. Well, that's a problem. Once again.
What do you mean?
Well,
Trent, what do you know about that? What are you talking about?
Well, birth control, when a woman, when she takes birth control, she passes the majority of that into the urine, which goes into the sewer, and from the sewage treatment plant, they're not required to scrub that out of the water. It doesn't somehow get filtered out and then put into the landfill. It ends up back in the discharge into the water supply, and then that recirculates back into the aquifers, pumped back up. And so now we're seeing estrogen levels in the tap water. We're seeing caffeine in groundwater. We're seeing pharmaceutical drugs in tap water from the ground. So they don't have to scrub all these toxins and pollutants and medicines out of the water. There's pharmaceutical drugs showing up in the water supplies all over the country, and it affects endocrine disruption, hormonal balances, infertility rates. 50 years ago, infertility was 1 in 200 couples, and it was a shocker 50 years ago. It'd be like, oh my goodness, you can't have a baby? What are you going to do? Now it's like, oh, who's your infertility specialist?
It's crazy how that spike has happened.
So 50 years ago,
Lexi, what do you got on that?
No, go ahead, because I want to.
Yeah, so 50 years ago, it was 1 in 200 couples. Today, it's 1 in 5 nationwide. And so what he's saying is that we've had a decrease in the ability to have children, or an increase, I guess, whichever way you want to look at it. But we're unable to get pregnant more in Utah, a big increase, more than anywhere else in the country.
Hey, and what's up, Utah? Welcome back to We Are the People Radio. This is your host, Jason Preston. And looky who's back. You.
Trevor and Trent.
No, you. Alexia. It's just been like how many dang shows?
Oh.
It's been a while.
It's been a year. 2024
It's been a year.
Kicking our booties.
Yes, but we're back. She's back in the fight. So anyways, good to have her back. Today we've got a couple rock stars, and she's going to get that thing figured out. You got it figured out?
No, but it's perfect.
All right, good. It's nice to have you back. So before we get started, just please make sure you're following on all of our socials down below. Most important, go to our website, wearethepeople.org. Sign up for our newsletter, and that way, when they deplatform us, you'll still get our newsletter, and that way we keep fighting. Can't stop us, right?
That's right.
We ain't going nowhere.
It is probably worth mentioning also about the latest and greatest news about TikTok being banned is potentially that could affect Rumble too. So
yeah, so everyone who's excited about TikTok ban, you're going to use that to get rid of Rumble, and they're talking about potentially X too. So
yeah, so go to our website.
It's coming. It's coming.
Go to our website, and it will be able to direct you from there.
That's right. Who do we got today?
2 superstar champions.
Superstars?
Yes.
Superstar champions?
That's why I came back. Superstars.
That's what it took.
Utah. Yes.
All right.
Well, I see you every day, so you're still a superstar. Well, back in, we have our favorite people from Enevive.
Do you remember their name?
Yes, of course I do. Trent Spafford, welcome back.
Thank you. Good to be back.
Yes, we love having you here in the studio.
I think everyone likes Trent. Our shows with Trent always do pretty well.
The Aquaman.
Come on.
Trent, good to have you.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Yes.
Been too long.
Yep.
We missed you.
We got some good stuff to cover today.
We always do. When you get into water in Utah, it's one of those topics that's always a big deal.
Yeah.
And who else?
And we have Trevor Lee.
State rep. It's honorable. Would you get it right?
Doctor? No.
Doctor's better.
The honorable
Trevor Lee of District 16, Layton, Davis County.
You know, Jason, I just realized your headset looks like the Avengers. It has like an Iron Man feel to it.
Yeah. That's because we fight crime.
Yeah.
I was going to say.
There's a lot of there, and I mean, as you know, there's a lot of crime to fight in Utah, and most of that crime is in our capital. You're surrounded by it. Yeah. We had to pull someone out of the Salt Lake swamp. out of the Salt Lake Swamp, Honorable Trevor Lee.
Direct from
And
the
we're
swamp.
and I will tell you this, we are thankful to have Trevor Lee. I get so frustrated with all of our reps, and we've had a few on here that I've appreciated coming on, and usually they get heat for coming on. And Trevor's been one of the best reps we have in there. We don't have a lot that I would say I respect, but Trevor is among a very, very small number. So thank you for being here.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for all you're doing.
So obviously, we got Trent, we're talking about water, and there's a lot we could talk about water, especially one day we're going to bring Chelsea on and get into water with Chelsea. And we're going to talk about the Great Salt Lake again, because that was a show that blew up way big. That was one of our first big shows. But the reason we've got both these guys on here is we want to talk about, again, water. And obviously, we want to go right to the horse's mouth, someone who knows exactly what's going on. Talk to us about water in Utah.
Yeah, no, and Jason, I appreciate that. There's a couple different routes we can go when it comes to water here in the state of Utah. Today, I think we're going to be focusing on the water we're drinking, water that we're consuming in our lives, and how that's affecting our health, how that's affecting our society, and even the economy. So today's the anniversary of COVID lockdowns. So 4 years ago today, we had all the absurdity going around the entire world.
And today is March 14th. Just for FYI for those, because this always gets posted a little bit later.
Yeah. All of the the pi people out there, the doctors, 3.14. So.
Oh wow, big day.
Yeah. So go get your pizza.
I wish.
Yeah.
A month off carbs.
Yeah.
But I digress.
Yes, you digress.
Let's talk about what's important.
That's why 24 has been tough.
That's exactly right.
So yeah, guys, I wanted to start with this. I've always kind of been involved in politics. But I didn't really get involved until COVID and starting to sit back and realize the absurdities of what we're being fed. I didn't question a lot of things. I didn't question any doctors. I didn't question a lot of science other than climate change hoax stuff. But our actual physicians, people who we trust. 6 feet, lockdowns, all of that stuff, just completely BS. And we know it now too. But why this is relating to water and where I got turned on to this and where I had met Trent at one point was I had a lady and her husband who live in my district. And the only question she asked me when I talked to her was, what are your thoughts on fluoride in the water? And I had never thought about this a lot. My wife was a dental assistant, and I've always taken my fluoride when I was a kid. My mom gave it to me, and I thought it tasted good, so I ate more than I should, and I'm okay, luckily.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Seem okay to us.
Yeah. So, when she asked me, I said, well, it's fluoride. I really don't see anything wrong with it. And she goes, oh, really? Well, what are your thoughts on COVID? So, COVID, this is stupid. This is dumb. My body, my choice. And she goes, okay, well, how do you feel about all the water that we're forced to be drinking right now? Oh, I've never thought of it that way. Like, this is actually kind of one of those free thinking ideas that needs to be flowing throughout the country more. And so, when we got in the legislature last year, my first session, a lot of the policy that we were drafting was around preventing the loss of those freedoms as we move forward into the future. Vaccine passports banned, making sure that you can't be masking up your kids in schools. We're making sure that as we move forward, some of these ridiculous things that we were doing cannot happen again. We are prepping for the future. So where does this lead into water? Well, we need to start prepping for the water we're drinking. A lot of the water talk right now is on filling up the Great Salt Lake, fill up the Great Salt Lake. Well, there have been some crazy statistics and scientific evidence coming out about what the water we're drinking, how that's affecting our society. And some of the big ones are with the fluoride in our water. I mean, is it essentially poisoning us? Are we wasting money? When our county voted to put fluoride in its water, there's a cost to that. Why? Why do you need that? If you want fluoride, you should have the right to go take it, not be forced into your water. The people who I know that don't want it have to go buy their own water. In fact, they can't even use a reverse osmosis because that also pulls out all the good minerals of their water. So even that, it's not fine. They have to go get well water and buy that by the gallons, bring it to their home every single week or month. I think that's ridiculous. So I think, and this is why it's so cool to have Trent here, is he's an expert on a lot of this, on the numbers, the data. He also has some solutions to this. I was talking to one of our county commissioners. They're looking at bringing fluoride back on the ballot to get rid of it in our county. That's a huge step. It was a battle last time they brought it on. It barely passed, but to bring it back is big. And if counties can't do it, let's see what happens either at the state level or at the federal level as it pertains to, once again, bodily autonomy. What are the freedoms that we have? Specifically, what did we learn from COVID? What can we now learn about the water and the side effects it's giving to our society? Utah had one of the largest, if not the largest, fertility increase in the entire country this last year.
Infertility?
Infertility. I'm sorry. Yes. Excuse me. Infertility increase. Why is that? We used to have the biggest, and it's.
Let's back that up. We had the biggest increase in infertility this year.
This last year.
Last year in 2023.
Correct.
And you said we used to have the biggest
increase in fertility.
So we went from having the highest fertility levels
Correct.
to the lowest fertility levels.
Correct. Decrease overall percentage. One of the things that's keeping us afloat, they say, is the mass migration that we have into our country and our state. That's what's keeping us above water there.
On population.
Correct. Mm-hmm. Correct. And so, as we look into that as a state, what are some of those problems? And I would argue with some of the evidence we have is it's like the birth control that flows and it gets recycled through that water that we end up drinking. Mm-hmm. Well, that's a problem. Once again.
What do you mean?
Well,
Trent, what do you know about that? What are you talking about?
Well, birth control. When a woman, when she takes birth control, she passes the majority of that into the urine, which goes into the sewer, and from the sewage treatment plant, they're not required to scrub that out of the water. It doesn't somehow get filtered out and then put into the landfill. It ends up back in the discharge into the water supply, and then that recirculates back into the aquifers, pumped back up. And so now we're seeing estrogen levels in the tap water. We're seeing caffeine in groundwater. We're seeing pharmaceutical drugs in tap water from the ground. So they don't have to scrub all these toxins and pollutants and medicines out of the water. There's pharmaceutical drugs showing up in the water supplies all over the country, and it affects endocrine disruption, hormonal balances, infertility rates. 50 years ago, infertility was 1 in 200 couples, and it was a shocker 50 years ago. It'd be like, oh my goodness, you can't have a baby? What are you going to do? Now it's like, oh, who's your infertility specialist?
It's crazy how that spike has happened.
So 50 years ago,
Lexi, what do you got on that?
No, go ahead, because I want to.
Yeah, so 50 years ago, it was 1 in 200 couples. Today, it's 1 in 5 nationwide. And so what he's saying is that we've had a decrease in the ability to have children, or an increase, I guess, whichever way you want to look at it. But we're unable to get pregnant more in Utah, a big increase more than anywhere else in the country. So
so why Utah?
Well, the geography of Utah is very interesting. A lot of it has to do with geological formations, but we live in this bowl, and that's why the Great Salt Lake is kind of the bottom of the bowl. And there's a layer of clay underneath the surface of the earth, which when the water kind of percolates down through the soil, it hits this first layer of clay, and it stops. It can't go any deeper, right? So it builds up the water into an aquifer, and that's the shallow aquifer. And that shallow aquifer is so contaminated right now, it's beyond repair. They don't use it anymore. So they drill through that layer of clay to the deep aquifer. And the deep aquifers really in the Salt Lake Valley range in depth from 75 feet to 800, 900 feet deep. And so wells are drilled at different depths to pick up the water that accumulates in there. And it's not empty space. It's not like some big cavity, big cave that the water fills up and we punch a straw into it and suck it out. But it's actually in the dirt, right? It's not hollow space. And so, in fact, over in by Kennecott Copper Mine, there have been private homeowners that own land that got a permit from the city to drill a well down through the shallow aquifer to the deep aquifer. And then Kennecott showed up and said, no, you can't do that, because they're afraid that if they puncture through the shallow clay, that it would just be like it would be like a straw putting those contaminants down into the deep aquifer. And people just don't realize where water even comes from. Most people in Utah, everything is
snow. It's all fresh from the year.
Yeah, the snow melt we're gonna drink that. Most of the water is deep groundwater. 95% of the water in Utah comes from deep wells.
Which is so funny, because the narrative that Cox pushes is that it's all from the reservoirs.
Yeah,
oh, the reservoirs are low. We're going to have to now, measure everybody's water and
Yeah.
be the water Nazi. And in reality, it's coming from these aquifers that are very full.
Yeah, about 5%. There's not enough water on this. That's called surface water, lakes and rivers and streams, surface water. But about 5% is all that we use that would get out to a city or a municipality. 5%. 95% of it is from deep well water, and so the recharge of that water. But the reason that you can't take a horse or a dog up Little Cottonwood Canyon and Big Cottonwood Canyon, it's a watershed. Any contamination that happens up high, it bypasses this layer that kind of ends, and those contaminants go directly into the deep aquifer. And so that's why any contamination that happens up on the foothills, those contaminants end up migrating down. And that's what at Anaviv, we call that the toxic tsunami.
Right.
And it's this wave of toxins that are hitting the water supply because it takes decades for these contaminants to migrate and then diffuse. So you could have a contamination issue here on the west side up by Kennecott, and then those contaminants migrate, and they call that a plume. And right now there is a plume of toxicity that's already migrated from the west bench, like over on the Oakers at Kennecott, and it's migrating all the way under Salt Lake City proper, all the way from where Kennecott is
into the water. So I guess there's two things. One is you're saying it's the water they're recycling. So the water that we're flushing out, all the garbage we're taking, the drugs we're taking, we flush it down through the sewer system. And you're saying that water's getting recycled? And
no, they have to discharge it somewhere. They don't ship it to outer space. They discharge it into the rivers, and then eventually that ends up percolating back through, and then it's this cycle. And that's where it's this cycle that the water is discharged into the surface water. It migrates down again into the aquifers, and it cycles back up. A lot of people don't know, or they don't think about this. We don't get new water from outer space, and water isn't evaporating into space. If it were so, we'd all be dead. So we're circulating the Earth's water. We're drinking the same water that the T-Rex drank, that Jesus Christ walked on. We're drinking that water. It just circulates.
And with pollution in the land and everything, it's just getting dirtier and dirtier. What were you pulled something? What do you have?
Yeah, no, this came across our desk at the beginning of the year. I think it was last updated towards the last November. And maybe Trevor, you can educate us on this. It's Department of Environmental Quality. It's a deq.utah.gov. It's SARS-CoV-2 sewage monitoring. I don't know if you're familiar with this as part of the government website. And it basically is a program that has been transitioned to the Utah Department of Health and Human Services. So are they monitoring our sewage? Is that what's going
absolutely.
on?
What do you mean SARS though? So what is that?
They could detect. They could
monitoring.
detect in the sewage water if there was COVID detected in the sewage. So they could take a sampling of this geographical area, this community, this city, and say, wow, we've got a lot of COVID in that city, and determine it from that.
It's how they originally traced it back on. I don't know if you guys remember, there was the theory, I can't remember the name of the gentleman who was saying that the COVID was the snake venom. Right?
Oh, yeah,
Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
And he got his idea
from that.
Because he's like, why is COVID why is it popping up in certain areas, and how do they know it's going to be there? And he was tracing it to the water testing. They were going to the water treatment centers, and they were able to test how much COVID was in that water. They could even predict there was going to be an outbreak before it got there. And that's where that theory would come from, was it was snake venom and all the side effects. But it was the water treatment centers, because they do test it and they figure all that stuff out, and that's how they were able to monitor, like, there's going to be an outburst here, and they knew before it would happen.
So do you need public buy-in for that? I mean, that's, a smaller scale, and of course it's for the greater good and health, but doesn't the public need to consent to monitoring of that?
Well, so that's interesting, because, with like fluoride, for example, and this is why these connect well, is fluoride was a vote. We had to vote in our county. I remember I was a kid. We had to vote if we wanted to put fluoride in the water. And it passed. So yeah, we did consent for that. But what are we not consenting for in our water? Everything else.
Yeah, because fluoride is one of
what if you don't believe in birth control, and let's say, but it's in your water? What if you can't, or you shouldn't have caffeine, and someone's having trouble sleeping at night? It could be in your water, right? What about medications? could be in your water.
Well, that accounts
How
for-
about pesticides?
Oh yeah.
I mean, the list is endless. So how do we deal with that?
Yeah, you know, and I think one of the things that, and this is sort of off topic, but it's related. What is it? What is the seed oil that's in everything, Alexia?
rapeseed?
No.
The engine oil? Oh, canola?
Canola oil. I was talking to James Lindsay. We hung out for a few days, and we were talking in the van about stuff. And he's like, "You know what the story about canola oil?" I'm like, "No." He's like, "You know, it's in pretty much everything."
Everything.
And he said, "Do you know where the story of where that came from? Do you guys know where canola oil came from?"
No.
Pre-World War II, it was designed to be engine oil, and it was used for engine oil. During World War II, they had these mass factories to produce this engine oil, and it was canola oil. After World War II, they're like, well, we have all these, we don't have the use for it anymore, so we're not in war because they ramped it up for World War II. Well, some of these guys who had these manufacturing plants got a bright idea. What if we sold it as for human consumption? Well, initially the public and everyone, it was a huge outcry. You cannot give people an engine oil, and it was banned. It was illegal. Sure enough, what they did, they got some lobbyists. The lobbyists went out, spent just obviously insane amount of money doing these marketing campaigns and obviously bribing legislators. And after a little while, guess what? We are now eating engine oil in almost every food because it is so cheap. And it's like people have now all of a sudden it's like now when I look at the ingredients, I'm like, I don't eat it because I know it's engine oil, but because we've been accustomed to it. And I think it's the same thing with our water. It's like we have lobbyists, we have politicians who really don't care about the people. You look at the pharmaceutical companies and the garbage they're putting in there that we know is toxic and is creating. We're going to give you this, which creates these problems. That's great because then we can solve this problem, and it's
a chain reaction.
It's like these guys do not. And I think the average person says, "Well, the city cares about my water. They're not going to let anything bad happen to me. Hunky dory, we live in Pleasantville."
And you know what's interesting about that, Jason? Because you talk about knowing what's in your water. I ran 2 bills this last session as it pertained to vaccine transparency. One in particular was, are mRNA vaccines used in the livestock that we have? And
right.
And I ran that bill, and I said, look, I don't care if you believe in it or you want that vaccine or not. That's not the point. I mean, you guys understand what you're eating. We all should. When you look at some food, you know the calories, you know the minerals in it. I mean, you know a lot. There's a lot of labels on food. That's what my bill was going to do, is if your cattle, which they are vaccinated, is getting an mRNA vaccine, there needs to be a label now on that livestock.
That's a great idea.
And so, like, it is about the transparency, right? And it's interesting to hear people say, I had multiple groups come out against that bill that were specifically the lobbying side, Farm Bureau and a couple other big ones. Transparency, like that is a right and a freedom and something that we should have. And we've done that a lot of times in our country, but it's when they're trying to hide it or they say, oh, it's not happening. Well, great, you don't have to label it then. It's that simple. Like, can we do something similar with our water? Like, or should we?
Well, and going back to what you were saying about canola oil back in post-World War II, that's exactly where fluoride came from. It was from Alcoa, the Aluminum Company of America, ALCOA. Alcoa was they were a huge aluminum processing company, and in the process of making the aluminum, they were polluting downwind over in Florida, and it was the pollution from the manufacturing of aluminum was decimating tree farms, cattle. The pollutants would hit, the rain would hit, and it would put it down on the ground, and it would destroy agriculture and kill the cattle. And so they started to look at that and they said, okay, you cannot just discharge this into the air anymore. So now you got to put a smokestack and spray water and mist into as the exhaust of the heat came off making the aluminum. It would go up and it would create a slurry. The water, like rain, would clean the particulate matter out of the exhaust, and it would be a slurry. And they would take that, and they couldn't take that slurry and just discharge it into the river. It would destroy the river. They couldn't bury it without certain containment fields, and it was very expensive to contain this now toxic substance that before was just emitted into the air. And so what they did is they started to harvest it at the same time. They got the idea that if we can sell this product and redistribute it out and get rid of it, and that is the fluoride.
That's where fluoride came
That's
from?
where it comes from. It's hydrofluorosilicic acid. And I'm not exaggerating this. This is all real. And I'm going to show on the screen here
And so Trent, you're saying that because I remember this as a kid. They said fluoride needs to be in the water because in Africa it flows naturally in the water and it's good for your teeth, and they all have really good teeth. You're saying that's not where it came from.
Absolutely not. So if we look on the screen here, this is the information on fluoride. So if you look at a tube of toothpaste, it says, don't swallow it. And there's a warning label that the FDA forces Crest, and I think that's a Procter & Gamble product. Crest would rather not have that label on the tube of toothpaste. Don't swallow it. And if you do, you better call poison control. But they're talking about a pea-sized amount of fluoride toothpaste, not half the tube. So according to them, that's 1/4 milligram of fluoride. And so tap water, when it's dosed across the country, and 74% of America right now has fluoridated water. Kentucky is the #1 fluoridated state. 99.9% of the water in Kentucky is fluoridated, and they have the worst tooth decay. Well, let me finish on this. This is crazy. So for the same reason you shouldn't swallow fluoridated toothpaste, you should not be swallowing fluoridated water. And in an 8 to 20 ounce glass of water, you have 1/4 milligram of fluoride in the water. And so this right here is a picture that I personally took from the warning label on the fluoride containment chamber in Draper, Utah. Hydrofluorosilicic acid, poison, do not take internally. This is what we're dripping into the water supply. These are the chemical byproducts of the aluminum industry and the phosphate fertilizer industry. When they make fertilizer, they have to heat the rock, the phosphorus out of the rock. It creates exhaust. And just like in the aluminum industry, the exhaust goes up these smokestacks, and a mist cleans the air so we don't decimate, cattle and send it into the air. It creates this slurry, and this is the slurry that we're putting back into the water supply. It is not some naturally mined Mother Earth mineral. That is not what it is. And it's incredibly, you got to wear look at this sign there, personal protection required. I have personally talked to some of the water municipality workers. When this trucker or this tanker comes in to refill these slurry containment tubes and tanks, they draw straws. None of them want to handle it. None of them. It'll eat through concrete in full concentration. If you were to have this spill on you, it would be like, remember the movie Alien? when the blood, it would like spurt and it would melt through concrete and steel. That is hydrofluorosilicic acid. So it is not sodium fluoride from the earth.
Wow.
This is what we're really putting into the water supply.
And you want to get even more sick about this? We're paying for this with our taxpayer money.
Yep. That's right.
That's so the government. We're gonna make the people pay for their own destruction. Alexia, tell us a story about your friend in Eagle Mountain.
Oh, this was interesting. So we have friends who actually lived across the street from one another on the Lehigh-Saratoga border, and they both moved at the exact same time to Eagle Mountain to build homes, and both of them have dogs. As soon as they both moved to Eagle Mountain, both of their dogs became very, very sick. I think it was some sort of Giardia or something water-related like that. And they were all scratching their heads. Oh, I guess they might have gone into a pond or something like that. No, it's the tap water that you're even giving pets. So if that's making dogs sick, can you only imagine what it's doing to us as humans?
Yeah. We actually told them they need to get Cal Innovive.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Honestly, you should have a lot of customers out in Eagle Mountain because I don't understand the water out there's pretty bad.
Harriman, same thing. It's that whole western.
Anywhere. The water here is crazy.
And even over time too, right? Can you imagine what it's doing to the pipes? Mm-hmm. This is flowing through this over time, and the longer we go, maybe it's deteriorating. What other kind of chemicals are getting in there? I mean, it's just going to get worse and worse. I mean, at what point do people say enough, or what point you're going to have to replace the entire pipeline system?
Yeah, the aging infrastructure is a huge problem. So in 2019, one of these pumps, if you look at this little picture here in Draper, the delivery pump malfunctioned in Sandy, Utah in 2019, and it pulled a massive concentration and loaded it into the water supply. Usually it's a slow trickle. So it was a pump malfunction, and the nation's worst fluoride spill happened in Sandy, Utah. And what happened, we're talking about the pipes and corrosion, it's so acidic, like alien blood, like the movie Alien, as it went through the piping, it dissolved the lead and the copper, and lead and copper, when you combine them, the toxicity exponentiates. And you had children being fed formula for their, baby food and stuff mixed with this water. And the city knew for 2 days that it had happened before they notified the consumers. And there have been lawsuits. There was some serious brain damage that happened to some of the children, and it's permanent. Once that fluoride hits the brain, it's permanent brain damage, along with high levels of copper. Copper and fluoride together it's a bad combination. But people think, oh, the water's fine, and they just don't think it through.
Well, I think people think, oh, I'm 40 years old, 45, whatever, however, and I've been drinking water and I feel fine.
Yeah.
But what do you say to someone like that?
Yeah. Well, it's bioaccumulative. Drinking water today you're not going to feel the effects. It's bioaccumulative. It's the long-term exposure to this.
The massive increases in cancer
Yeah,
in my generation, right? It's stuff like that people and scientists are mind-boggled. What is going on? What's the issue here?
Well, it's water. And it's
ADHD, all of it.
There's a accumulation.
Is there
of
any,
things.
the men's testosterone levels are dropping like crazy over the
thing.
years. I mean, you look at testosterone, and then this is why I think we have the huge rise of the beta men and the, what are the trucks that they all drive? The Rivians.
Sorry to our viewers.
Sorry. It's hard. Every time we see a Rivian, we're like, oh, beta male.
But there's truth in this. Like, there really is. It's an endocrine disruptor. But, for us, and the reason that, Trevor and I were talking when we met each other in an event and we started conversing about fluoride, is it's unconstitutional to force a drug into the water supply. I would like to see legislation that just says we are protecting our water supplies from any and all possible harm of any kind of additive added. There's actually been talk about putting lithium into the water because if everybody got lithium doses, schizophrenia would go down. We'd have less mass shootings. And how else? I mean, if you can put it into the water, everybody's, they're kind of beholden to the water supply. So when you start adding fluoride to the water, and they've known what it does to the brain for decades, all the way back to the 1930s, they knew what fluoride was doing, and it was the big companies like Alcoa and Dow Chemical and pharmaceutical companies that really capture the regulators that regulate them. They capture them at the federal level, the FDA and the EPA.
So this, I'm glad to have Trevor in here, because Trevor, talk to us about the influence the impact lobbyists have on things like this. How big a problem is it?
Well, okay. And I'm going to preface this by saying not all lobbyists are bad. There are some good groups, and there's a lot of people who, it's their job, it's what they're doing. Did you guys all see the James O'Keefe going underground talking to these guys at the FDA, how the lobbyists, they work and buy each other off for their products and their food and everything?
I don't know if I saw that.
So look up James O'Keefe. He went undercover, and he got one of these guys at the FDA, said it's hundreds of millions of dollars that the pharmaceutical companies and these grocery company, or not grocery companies, I guess like Procter & Gamble and stuff, who they're paying to make sure their stuff gets on the shelves that they can get it by, the sniff test. Well, let's take it to a lower scale here in Utah. And I'll take a good company. Let's take like Energy Solutions, for example. They have a lobbyist, and they're good, and they have a business they want to run. And so they're going to try to run legislation or come to legislators, say, hey, I need you guys to make sure that we can stay open, make sure what we're doing is safe, make sure that, what we have here is okay for the state. And so they'll come to the legislature, they'll have someone run a bill, and then they'll work the body, the Senate and the House, on that bill, like if they should pass it. Maybe it's to say, hey, housing's starting to creep out west more. Maybe you need to guys push your facility. Maybe the bill is to say, hey, we could bring more of this uranium here into Utah, or whatever the chemical is that they need to dispose of. We have a good space. It's not inhabitable. It's far enough away. I'm okay with that. But the problem that I have is and this is on the legislator. This is on the senator. This isn't the lobbyists that are just doing their job, but it's them listening or not doing their own research or figuring out, well, what are the complications of this bill? So if I'm going...
it's also hard when you've got 1,500 bills being pushed on our reps per year, roughly, and that so many bills that, as Mike Schultz said himself, right sitting where you are, there's so many bills, and they're mostly pushed by these lobbyists that the reps don't even have time to read it. So they're just listening to the lobbyists and taking their recommendation along with the leadership recommendation.
And congrats for getting through that. I mean, that's a mind-boggling task to get through 15
Yeah, no,
bills.
it's anyone who says they read all the bills is lying. You can't. It's too much. And there's some reasons for that. But I will say this though, every bill, for example, that I run comes from a constituent. Not every bill is like that. You have a lot that do come from lobbyists. Trent, we could have you come up to the legislature. We could run a bill about water, cleaning it up, bringing things in there, and let's go through and let's see if legislators listen on it. I'm confident you could get enough votes that when they see the problems that we have, that this is something that would fall in line with our freedom, constitutionality of it, and understanding that this could fix a serious problem in our state.
Unless there's lobbyists who's affected by the decisions.
And then that would be the other part to this, right, is let's see who's going to come out against it. Let's see who would come up to the legislature, companies that put this stuff all and that make a lot of money off of it. Let's see who comes and lobbies against it. When all the facts are placed on the table, you can come to a committee, you can have tons of people come, you can testify for it, testify against it, you bring all the facts to the table. That's where it says you can kind of see where's the body standing on this bill. Are these lobbyists coming in with all the money affecting the vote for this? Or is Trent able to say, hey, I've got plenty of facts and data here that this is a serious issue and it could easily be fixed?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to digress too much, but I will tell you they pulled Alexia and I in on a bill for privacy. And the reality is when it was very clear to the group of people who were working on that bill what needed to be done to actually protect our data, the answer was very clear that there is no way in hell that the lobbyists and the people who guard that data and who use it would ever let these reps vote for it. And so what happened is they says, therefore we have to do something that is very minimal that we won't offend them. So I understand this process and it's a little bit frustrating to me, but it would be nice if the reality was we could go in with very good data and do the right thing because of the right thing rather than have these lobbyists and these reps in these lobbyist pockets controlling it.
And here's how you get around that though, Jason. This is the words on the wall behind you. We are the people, right? That pressure constituents put on their legislators is important. It really is. The only reason that you would get tons of pressure and they still go against the will of what their constituents want is they know there's not enough of them to vote them out of office. Yeah, so that's where every person watching this, if you have something you're passionate about, how many times last session were you emailing or texting your legislator or just trying to call them or pull them aside? Like, how many of you are?
I mean, look, we've filled that place with thousands of people and been railroaded. So I mean, I'm a little bit like.
But it's what you have to try to do, right? Like it's part of the process.
In theory. All right. So the fluoride. I like what you talked about at the beginning. The infertility rates going like crazy because that's something I didn't realize is that all these. Whether it's vaccines or medications people are taking or birth control is going back into the water, and now caffeine, and that is seeped into the water the average person is drinking, and that is obviously causing massive problems.
Yeah. So, all over the world, fluoride has been banned. In fact, I'm just going to read this right here. Since the authorities in North America, in America, have refused to let go of the fluoridation paradigm, local communities are doing the work for them. And this is where we need to engage as a local community. So since 2010, over 240 communities have rejected the practice where they once fluoridated the water. They've now rejected it, including large communities, Calgary, Alberta, over in Canada, population 1.3 million. It was once fluoridated. They've now banned it. Portland, Oregon, 900,000 people. Wichita, Kansas, 385,000. Bucks County, Pennsylvania, 385,000. I'm not sure the population in Salt Lake County, and I'm not sure about you're in Davis County. I know in 2003, we voted it in Salt Lake County, and it's a county law that the water is fluoridated. So if any of you are listening, if you live in Salt Lake County, and I'm not sure what the percentage is up in Davis County, but 100% of Salt Lake County, it's a law that they have to fluoridate the water because we voted it in. And it barely passed 51-49, barely. And the way it was worded on the ballot was very kind of slanted to get the yes, let's vote it in, versus just some words that could really have made a difference. But there's suppression of this information also. And it's just remarkable. In 2012, a study on fluoride neurotoxicity was authored at Harvard by Dr. Philip Grandjean, a world-renowned expert on the developmental of neurotoxicity. And the results, I'll just summarize all this. The result was, on his research at Harvard, it was like, wow, mothers that are drinking the fluoridated water, it's affecting the development of the brain in utero. So mothers who were drinking it and exposed to it, and we're not even talking about transdermal absorption through the skin in the shower. We're talking just internal consumption. It's affecting the brain development of babies as the mother is developing the baby. And they've known this for decades, by the way. This isn't new news. So the school of Harvard came into this professor's office and said, we need you to sign this release that you're not discrediting the fluoridation policy, but you're just studying fluoride. And he said, no, I'm not going to sign that. They went to his dean and had him sign it, that based on the information and the science of this research, that it's okay to fluoridate water despite the research just on fluoride. And the dean had never even looked at the paper itself, and he signed off on it. And this doctor, and you can go to the fluorideactionnetwork.org and look at his testimony. He left Harvard. He's like, if you're going to do this, the freedom of science, I'm out. And he left Harvard, the prestigious, Harvard School of Medicine. But in that research, they combined fluoride in with the well-known neurotoxin of lead, mercury, and arsenic. They said fluoride seems to fit in with lead, mercury, and arsenic, and it causes chemical brain drain. It drains the power of your mind. And they were even said, if you are exposed to so many milligrams per liter, every time you do that, it's 2 points off the IQ score. And so if a mother is drinking a lot of water to hydrate, every time she's drinking fluoridated water, 2 points off. And that's the difference between being, in a top reading class at the front of the room and sitting in the back of the room not knowing how to count. So they've proven it. There's 76 human studies that have proven that fluoride is a neurotoxin. Even more animal studies. And yet it continues to be promoted because of naivety. We just have to understand number one, where does it come from? And this slurry that I talked about earlier from the aluminum industry. And it also, we're buying this from China. So we're buying a toxin that they cannot pour into the lakes. They can't dispose of it. They have to pay to store it. But if they sell it, not only do they make money, but then they don't have to store it. And that's the truth.
That should be a red flag too. China, we know what they want to do is get rid of this, get rid of us. They're the ones pushing the fentanyl through the border. So, and I'm sure this stuff's not really regulated either. That's...
Well, and they've come out and said that's how they're going to have warfare against America without firing a shot, right? They're going to come out. They're going to do simple things like that. They're going to do things that seem like we're not at war with them, but they're at war, and they're very open about it with internally, and it's all under the radar.
It's interesting. You're talking about fentanyl, and how potent fentanyl is. That even if ICE agents are able to apprehend, they can overdose just by being around that. Going back to what we were talking about earlier about it being reabsorbed through the soil, I wonder when they reach that critical point that people will start getting fentanyl poisoning.
So I had a question. What is approximately how long does it take for it to go from we flush something down the toilet into the water to now we're drinking it? So the water we're drinking now, where's that from, roughly? Do you have an idea?
Well, when the water falls from the sky, depending on where you're at in the valley, where the water comes up from the well to the city treatment plant may have fallen from the sky 50 to 200 years ago. And this is why we call it the toxic tsunami. So the water that a lot of municipalities are pulling up from the deep well was the water that was contaminated 50 years ago. And so the 50 years, all that pollution that's been emitted into the environment, the air, the soil, the dirt, the refineries, all these Superfund sites. We have 9 Superfund sites in Salt Lake County alone, and those are the worst hazardous waste dumps in the country. They're designated as a Superfund site. Forbes magazine came out a couple of years ago, and I think it was in 2017, and they asked the question, where's the most toxic place to live in America? and they studied all the cities, all the counties, all of it. And Utah turned up on the third most polluted state in the country to live. And you'd think, oh, that's in New Jersey or Philadelphia or, Pennsylvania. No, right here in, beautiful Utah, the third most polluted state. And they did it on the amount of toxicity that's emitted into the environment.
Wow.
And in Salt Lake County is the second most polluted county out of 1,900. I think it was 9,000 counties in the whole United States. Salt Lake County was number 2.
Wow.
And is that because of where we're located? Is it that bowl you're talking about?
Kennecott Copper Mine.
Is Kennecott what is a big?
That's the bit there. Kennecott Copper is the second largest polluter of pollutants, the 5th largest producer of pollutants in the entire country. And nowhere else in the country do you have such a mine so close to a city. Usually it's like 100 miles away out in the middle of nowhere. But we have Harriman built up on the slope to the tailings. Yeah. I could tell you horror stories about that.
If you have not seen the first video we did with Trent where we get into all this, you need to watch it. And it's
my mind.
It's no longer on YouTube because our YouTube got taken down. But you go to our Rumble and watch it. It gets into all this stuff, and it will blow your mind. It's not just Kennecott, but it's how the lobbyists have completely manipulated Utah's legal dosages of how much toxins we're able to have in our water, so that the amount of toxins that are allowed in our water in Utah are significantly higher than most anywhere else in the country.
Yeah.
So what's legal here, most other states would have banned. I mean, it's insane. It's one of these things about Utah that just blows your mind.
Well, and the issue with fluoride is that, like what you were talking about, we have the right to choose. Like we shouldn't be mandated. Here we are in the 4th anniversary of COVID lockdown. I believe that we have the right to choose whether or not we take a drug or a vaccine or wear a mask. We need to be educated. And when they put it in the water supply, it denies people the right to choose. It denies them of informed consent. A city or a county can do to an entire county what a doctor would lose their license for if they did to one single patient, because you have to give them informed consent. You got to give them the information, and you cannot force them to have a surgery. A doctor can't say, I'm going to force you to have a knee replacement against your will. But that's what they're doing when they add the water to the fluoride to the water supply. And that's where I think it's unconstitutional that I have the right to choose. And what's interesting about this, the dynamic of the cost. They're fluoridating all the water at the treatment plant, yet fluoride is only beneficial in their mind, to the promoters of fluoride, to children as their adult teeth are developing in the jaw. Once their adult teeth are done, swallowing fluoride does nobody any good. So as an adult, drinking fluoridated water doesn't do you any good to swallow it systemically, because your cells, your teeth are done growing. So when children, so again, this is what they say, is that during the developmental stages of the teeth in the mandible, the jawbone, as the teeth are growing, if you swallow fluoride, it'll harden those teeth. And yet today we have a 41% pandemic. 41% of children between the ages of 12 and 15 have permanent scarring on their teeth. And you see it mild would be like chalk marks on somebody's teeth, and you think, oh, they had braces. No, it's not. It's over fluoride exposure. A little bit worse is yellowing, yellow stains on the teeth. And you think, why didn't you brush your teeth? It's not that. They swallowed too much fluoride as a child. And then severe is brown and even black. So I'll send a picture over, maybe about right here, we can put the picture up of the degrees of dental fluorosis, but it has nothing to do with, how, brushing your teeth. It's over fluoride exposure, and it's the only thing that causes that. And so as children, if you're swallowing too much toothpaste, if you're drinking too much water, you're getting overexposed. And then mothers who are drinking the healthy choice of good water, thinking they're protecting their kids, and they're not drinking, soda pop or sugary drinks like orange juice or whatever. And so they choose water. It's a healthy choice. But then what's happening,
putting it in their baby,
is they're choosing water from a bottle. And now that's a whole other rabbit hole,
getting the plastics.
From the plastics and the chemicals that leach into the water that are endocrine disruptors. And so that affects birth defects, yes, but infertility rates as well.
All right, so Trent, so right now I've got a 2.5-year-old, 1.5-year-old baby due any day. My wife's pregnant. She drinks a lot of water. We don't drink tap water, but we drink out of our fridge. It's not, it's filtered. Okay. What are solutions until, let's say we can get this on the ballot or we can do something to get fluoride out? What can someone like my wife do right now? Do you need like reverse osmosis? Like what is a solution at the moment now? So like I make sure that my future daughter doesn't have defects of the brain or lower IQ because of this.
Yeah, so a fridge filter does not remove fluoride, unfortunately. Most fridge filters are some form of a carbon, coconut shell, activated charcoal, and so as the water flows through this media, the chemicals absorb like chlorine and some of the ammonia byproducts. So it is better than nothing, but the fluoride does not absorb into granulated activated carbon at all. And so it's a little bit more difficult to get fluoride out. That's why it's so problematic, is it actually causes undue burden upon somebody that wants to remove it. Far better is, like, if you want fluoride, here, let's give you free fluoride tablets. If you choose to do it, go ahead. Come in to the wherever and get free.
Planned Parenthood.
That's interesting. I thought that very thing. And then you can take that dose, and but man, I would never give your kids a neurotoxin. It's crazy. So the only real options would be to either like get a glass container, because you don't want to be drinking from plastics. A mother that's drinking from bottled water from plastics, whether it's the big 5-gallon ones delivered by Mount Olympus, those are the worst. And there's no such thing as a chemical-free plastic. It might say BPA-free, mother approved, but that's a whole ridiculous example of where the petroleum industry switched away from BPA and said, we're BPA free now. And they just switched to be a BPA substitute. It's like a smoker switching brands from Camel to Marlboro. And because they switch brands, they don't smoke anymore.
So
no, they're smoking.
I know plastic is bad. You've told us many times we need to get off the bottle. But as things like the Stanley brands come up and we have, obviously your branded one probably doesn't have it, but I've heard a lot of research about especially the Stanley cups that are so popular right now having lead in them. So let's say we put, good, clean Edevive water in a Stanley cup. Mm-hmm. Is there potential contamination there too?
No, there might be some lead in the actual metal, but that's so infinitesimally small. And it's interesting that information came right out after all of these photon microplastics that were discovered in water, far beyond from the plastics, nanoparticles, not just microparticles, but nanoparticles. And then like the next week it was, these Stanley products, have lead in them also. And I find that very coincidental.
Yeah.
And so it's propaganda. But steel or glass, if you really want to be safe, just use glass.
I agree.
Right?
And as we wrap up.
But let me answer your question. So you have to either get purified water. Reverse osmosis is the best water. And there's a lot of misinformation out there about minerals being removed that are good. And, when you strip out everything with an RO or reverse osmosis or distillation, that's somehow bad for you. And that is actually not true. So rainwater is distilled water. Drinking rainwater, if you could stick a straw up in the cloud and suck the water out before all the air pollution and whatever's in the air, it's distilled water, and that's the best water on the planet. Drinking pure water does not demineralize your bones. You do not have to counterbalance it. It's better to flush the toxins out. So get a reverse osmosis system. Only drink that. Fridge filters are better than nothing, but they don't remove fluoride. Or get glass bottles, and we have a fill station in Pleasant Grove. You can come get free ultra-purified water at no cost at our research center, because we give back to the community. That's one thing that we love to do. You can go to a water wellness store or go to the grocery store. You can buy super purified water, by those little stands in the middle of the grocery store. But you want to stay away from the plastics. You want to be to get glass.
Yeah. Trent, I will tell you, I appreciate what you're doing. You cannot see what's going on with the infertility, with the cancer, the men's testosterone levels, the estrogen. I just appreciate what you're doing, and I do appreciate, because I know everyone can't afford a system. If you haven't checked out Edevive, Trent, what is the website?
Yeah, enavive.com, ENEVIVE, enavive.com.
I mean, there's some things I just think are worth investing in, and honestly, it's not personal because I think you're awesome, and to me my mom always was like, do not drink tap water, do not drink tap water. So for me, like, my mom was always like warning me about this stuff. So I was very thankful when we were able to get.
And look how good looking you are now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just kidding. But no, I mean, so, and the thing is, if you get a hold of Innovive.
You know what? It is affordable. We have a way that for like $24 a month, you can have an unlimited supply of purified water in your own home on tap. And we hook it up to your fridge so your ice cubes go crystal clear.
I love that.
For $24 a month, people are spending $50-$60 a month on bottled water, and they're getting contaminated by all the plastics. So it really is it's very affordable. We have other systems that if you're a renter or you're a student and you're in student housing, we have countertop filters that purify the water to a subatomic level that does get fluoride out. So there's really no excuse. If your health is not worth $1 a day, we have ways to do it very affordably. And we have shower head filters that remove chemicals that absorb through the skin in the shower. So you can reduce your rates of all kinds of health issues from cancer, neurological brain disorders, and I cannot say prevent or cure. Yeah. Of course, the FDA might come and slap me on the face if I did that. But you can reduce your risk. That's the key. How far do you want to go? How much do you want to reduce your risk to these issues? And look, water is the fundamental building block of life. Every cell, every tissue, every organ requires water to function. And the water that you ingest and also absorb through your skin, we drink through our skin, it's paramount for health.
Yeah.
And it's getting much, much worse. Every day you turn your tap on, you're seeing the best water that you will ever see. It's going to the tsunami is rolling in, and it's going to get much, much worse.
Alexia?
No, you've ruined me for water. I go to restaurants now, and I basically throw the water in their face, and I say, "What is this toilet water?"
I know, right?
No, we bring our own water pretty much every.
And last thing I want to say here, guys,
Yeah.
before we wrap up, Trent, thank you. And for those of you that have been watching, petition your commissioners to get fluoride out of the water and put it on the ballot. Talk to your neighbors, spread this information, because the more people that know, the more pressure that's going to be put on your local representatives, your politicians, to make sure that this is something we could do to help stop the bleeding when it comes to a lot of these problems.
Yeah, we have a petition at enavive.com that you could sign to help us get fluoride out of the water supply. We're just trying to create awareness.
We'll put a link to it in the show notes.
That'd be awesome.
Okay.
You know, it's a shame. We'll have to do a follow-up show with you, Trent, with Chelsea to go over some of the water bills this month, or this session. So we had several, some of them touch on water supply, some of them touch on much more nefarious things, private-public partnerships, the Great Salt Lake, centralizing some of that power. So, I mean, I don't think there was a lot of optimism with this session as it relates to some of those water bills, but I'd love to really dig into that with someone like Chelsea and Trent and see the implications.
Let's do it. And finally, for those, the last option is get a glass, a few of these glass jugs. And if you go to Innovive, they're down in Pleasant Grove. What's the address there?
Yeah, 527 West State Street, Suite 104. Right there, kind of by Crust Club and Swim Kids.
Go to their website. Go to their website. You'll find the address.
What I think was really interesting and enlightening even for us was bring in your water.
Just
see how bad it is. Let them do the testing on it.
But if nothing else, get some glass jugs and go to Innovive, and they will let you fill it for free.
And even plastic,
especially if you're pregnant.
Even the plastic, better to have pure water than tap water. Better to have it in a glass container. And the cool thing about what we do is we'll meet with you and we will share with you the research and the data. We'll pull the water reports because each municipality has a different chemistry of water. Water up in Sandy is a totally different chemistry than out in Magna and Harriman and Lehigh. Arsenic levels off the chart in Lehigh. It's insane. Eagle Mountain, Saratoga Springs, Bountiful. Like, it's mind-blowing when we look at the water reports from the city, and we'll do this without a sales pitch. No bait and switch. No, when are they going to try to sell me something? That's not what we do. It's strictly research, and it takes about a half an hour to go over it.
And last thing as we close, especially if you've got friends that are pregnant, share this with them. Let them know. People don't understand what's going on. And again, you look at the infertility rates. You look what's going on in this country. And we can stop we stop it. So let's and even if it is doing it for free by going and getting their water. So Trent, thank you for coming on.
Thank
I
you.
love having you on. And
Thanks for what you guys do. You guys are very inspirational. I really appreciate your call out to local Americans, patriots, people that want to take a stand. So what you're doing, I want to commend the both of you, and thank you for your service in our legislature here in Utah. So it's a big thing. Thanks for stepping up.
Thank you, Trent. And we are very glad to have you as well. I mean,
Honorable.
The Honorable.
Thanks, doctors.
Trevor Lee, Reverend. Remember, I'm Reverend.
Reverend and
there we go.
doctor.
It's Reverend and Dr. Alexia Preston.
I'm not a doctor. You don't want me giving you
And-
medical advice.
And it's good to have you back.
Yeah.
Missed you. So anyway, thank you guys for being here. This is still the greatest country, always will be in the world. And God bless America. God bless America. And God bless. Did I just say that twice?
Yes.
God
But we
bless.
probably need the double blessings. So
We need more than that.
Triple God bless
Yes.
America.
And God bless Utah. Thank you guys.